The movie starts at a military base where some officers are talking about a new experiment. The main officer says they can't use their best pilots or soldiers because there hasn't been a war in their area for a long time. The best ones have either retired or passed away. So they decide to try a special experiment. They create a box-shaped room called the sleeping chamber. Inside, a person's body will freeze, but they won't die or get older. They'll stay just as they are until needed. The problem? They've never tried this on a person before. They need 2 people for the experiment. And after looking around, they find a guy named Joe who works for them. Joe isn't special at anything, and he doesn't have any family. Along with Joe, they choose a woman who's known for tricking people. The officers pick these 2 because if the experiment fails and they die, no one will care or ask questions. Since neither has family, they seem like the perfect choice. The woman is scared and doesn't want to go in the chamber, but Joe tells her it's okay. Finally, they both go inside and fall into a deep sleep, waiting for the experiment's results. Before using people, they tested the chamber on animals. Now both Joe and the woman are in the sleeping chamber, not knowing what will happen next. A few days later, the officer in charge gets arrested for having drugs, and the place where the experiment happened gets destroyed by the government. No one knows that Joe and the woman are still inside the chambers, frozen in time. Years go by, and the world gets worse. By the year 2505, people have become less smart and forgotten how to act politely. The world is now full of foolish and rude people, completely different from the world Joe knew. Meanwhile, Joe and the woman's chambers are buried under lots of garbage, and everyone forgets about them. One day, a car dumps more trash onto the huge pile, causing an avalanche of garbage. One chamber falls down and crashes into a house, and it automatically opens. After sleeping for 500 years, Joe wakes up. Even though so much time has passed, Joe looks the same, young and unchanged, just like the officer said. But Joe feels confused and tired from his long sleep. Joe, confused, asks the man whose house he crashed into, "Where's our base?" The man, not understanding what Joe means, replies, "What base?" Joe is still thinking about his old military base from 500 years ago and can't figure out what's happening. Annoyed, the man kicks Joe out of his house. Joe goes outside and sees a group of people. He asks them for directions to his base, but because he talks in an old-fashioned way, they respond rudely and use bad language, which makes Joe even more confused and frustrated. Joe realizes he's in a world he doesn't recognize and has no idea how to get back to his old life. In the year 2505, everyone talks using bad language, and it seems like no one cares. Joe, still trying to get used to this new world, feels sick after being in the chamber for so long. He decides to go to a hospital for a checkup, but finds it filthy, like it hasn't been cleaned in years. Joe is thirsty and tries to get some water, but instead of water, a strange drink comes out of the tap. Worried, he asks a man where he can find some water. The man looks at Joe like he's crazy and asks, "You mean the water from the bathroom?" Joe, frustrated, says, "No, I need drinking water." The man just laughs and walks away, leaving Joe even more confused. Joe continues to the doctor, who starts examining his hand. While waiting, Joe sees a newspaper with the year 2505 on it. That's when Joe realizes he's not in 2005 anymore. He's 500 years into the future. Looking out the window, he sees that everything around him has changed a lot. As the doctor examines Joe's hand, he notices something strange. Joe doesn't have a tattoo. In this future world, everyone has a tattoo on their hand that works like an ID card. The doctor gets scared and calls the emergency police, who quickly come and arrest Joe. The police take Joe to a weird machine and tell him to put his hand inside. The machine is supposed to identify him, but when a number appears, it asks Joe, "Is this your number?" Confused, Joe replies, "Not sure." The machine misunderstands and thinks Joe's name is "Not sure," so it tattoos that name on his hand. Next, Joe is taken to a place where they give him an IQ test to see how smart he is. They ask him a question they think is really hard. You have 2 gallons in one bucket and 4 gallons in another. How many buckets do you have? Joe answers simply 2, which surprises them. They then take him to jail. Joe manages to escape from the clueless police who can't keep up with him. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, the woman who is in the chamber with Joe, named Rita, is causing trouble. Now that she's awake, she's been tricking people and stealing their money to survive in this strange new world. Joe eventually returns to the house where he first woke up and talks to the man living there. He asks, "When I arrived, I heard people talking about building time machines. Do you know anything about that? The man replies, yeah, I know about them. Joe gets excited and asks for directions, but the man says, why should I help you? What's in it for me? Joe quickly thinks of a deal and says, if you help me get back to my time, I'll give you a lot of money, enough to make you rich overnight. The man, eager for money, agrees and takes Joe to where the time machine is rumored to be. On the way, Joe unexpectedly runs into Rita. They decide to team up and continue their search together. But before they can get far, Joe gets scanned again, and this time, the police capture him. Instead of going to jail, they take him to the White House. At the White House, Joe finds out something shocking. The authorities think he has the highest IQ on the planet. His simple answer to the IQ test earlier had made him seem like a genius. The president arrives and, during a big speech, announces that they found the smartest person alive, Joe. But there's a bigger problem. In this future, crops have stopped growing and food is running out. The government believes Joe's supposed superior brain power can help them figure out how to grow crops again. They think his brain works faster and better than anyone else's. Joe is then taken to a dry field where nothing is growing. He calls Rita and the man to join him, planning to use their help to find the time machine. His goal is to escape the strange world and return to his own time, taking Rita with him. Joe soon realizes that the man with the map tricked him. The map was fake, and now Joe has to find the time machine on his own. Determined to go back to his own time, Joe knows finding the machine is his only chance. While looking around the fields, Joe discovers the problem. People in this future have been using a company drink instead of water to grow crops. That's why nothing is growing. Joe tries to explain that plants need water, not the weird drink everyone is using. But no one believes him. In this future, everyone, from kids to old people, only drinks this artificial drink, and the idea of using water seems strange to them. Desperate, Joe comes up with a wild plan. He tells the people he can talk to the crops, and the plants have told him they need water. Although they're skeptical at first, they start watering the fields based on Joe's advice. Days go by, but the crops still haven't grown and the people get frustrated. The drink company starts losing a lot of money as more people use water instead of buying their drink. Many workers lose their jobs and blame Joe for their problems. Anger spreads, and soon, people want Joe punished for the mess. Things get worse, and Joe is sentenced to death. The authorities plan to show his execution live for everyone to watch. Meanwhile, Rita and the man discover something amazing. The crops Joe watered are finally starting to grow. The plants are thriving, just like Joe said they would. As the world gets ready to watch Joe's execution, Rita and the man rush to stop it. They bring a camera operator to the fields and stream a live video showing the crops growing. When everyone sees this, Joe's death sentence is canceled. People realize Joe was right, and his actions saved their food supply. With his life saved, Joe asks Rita to come with him to return to their original time using the time machine. But Rita surprises him by saying no. She's grown to like this new world, even with its oddities, and decides to stay. The president then makes a big announcement. Joe will become the vice president of the world. But Joe, still wanting his old life back, says he wants to return to his time. This makes everyone sad because they had hoped Joe would lead them through their problems. As people talk about their struggles and challenges, Joe feels a strong sense of responsibility. Moved by their situation, he decides to stay and help them build a better future. In the end, Joe and Rita get married, and Joe becomes the president of this strange, futuristic world.